Chapter 104. Man in Abyss receives a bamboo hat in the rain. I know no one will come, but it's none of your shitty business, Shillian retorted with force. Then why did you poke a hole to lie down in? White No-Face languidly asked. Are you trying to get some attention? No one will cry over you. I'm doing this because I want to, Shillian countered. It's none of your shitty business. If someone does come to help you, what will you do? And if no one comes, what will you do? Shillian didn't answer his questions, but instead started cursing. Why do you talk so much shit? I'm gonna throw up. It's none of your shitty business. None of your shitty business. Even as his words became more vulgar and rude, his tone more frustrated, he still only knew so many curse words. White No-Face laughed out loud in amusement. Silly child. He sighed and turned around. Just as well. Either way, there is only one day left. It's fine to let you foolishly struggle for a bit. Regardless, no one will come give you a cup of water or help you pull out the sword. Remember, White No-Face reminded him with once more of the consequences. Tomorrow at sunset, if you still haven't unleashed the plague of human face disease, the curse will fall upon you. Shillian listened quietly and didn't move a muscle. The third day, Shillian was still lying in that deep, human-shaped pit in the middle of the road. His position hadn't even changed. The crowd that day wasn't much different from the crowd from the day before. They all detoured around him at a distance and simply went about their day. Although the incident where a strange man fell from the sky had been reported to the authorities, when they heard that it might be a god of misfortune, they didn't want to deal with it. He wasn't really causing any trouble, after all, just lying there like a dead man. The authorities rushed off the affair with a vague promise to keep an eye on it for a few days. That basically meant they weren't going to bother. Besides, maybe something would change on its own. Several curious children came scurrying over and squatted by the edge of the pit to look at the strange man inside. They picked up a tree branch and began to surreptitiously poke at him. But Shillian was like a dead fish and didn't react. They were still fascinated and wanted to try to throw something at him to see if he'd respond to that, but they were discovered by their parents before they could follow through. The children were lectured harshly, then dragged home and grounded. The water merchant from the day before still kept sneaking glances in his direction. Shillian hadn't had a single drop of water for a day and a night, and a layer of dry, withered dead skin had formed on his lips. Feeling sorry at the sight, the water merchant ladled out a bowl of water to deliver it, but his wife deliberately elbowed him and made him topple the bowl. He was forced to relent. Perhaps the heavens wanted to join in on the fun, for after midday, drizzling rain began to fall. The street vendors hurriedly packed up their stalls, and the pedestrians shouted at each other to hurry home. They all quickly left. The rain poured harder and harder, scouring Shillian's face until he looked even paler and soaking his entire body until he was utterly drenched. A shadow silently appeared next to Shillian, its owner dressed in white. No one on the street seemed to have noticed this peculiar figure. White No-Face looked condescendingly down at him. The sun is about to set. Shillian was silent. You aren't the god of misfortune, but they would rather believe that you are, and they're unwilling to believe you aren't. Once upon a time you defied the heavens and created rain for young Anne, yet now they won't even give you a cup of water. Stabbing you 100 times might have been done in desperation, but now they're not even willing to do something as simple as pulling out a sword. They all consider it too much trouble. I've told you this time and time again. No one will come help you. White No-Face finished, his voice soft with pity. There was a voice deep down in Shillian screaming hysterically. Admit it. What he said is true. There's no one. There isn't a single person who will help me. As if he had heard the desperate cry in Shillian's heart, White No-Face seemed to smile a bit. He reached out and gripped the hilt of the black sword. It's all right. They won't help you. But I will. He exerted some force and pulled the black sword from Shillian's stomach, then tossed it down beside Shillian with a resounding clang. Soon after, the shadow of white cloth in the rain laughed lightly and backed away, as if he had achieved all he wanted to do, leaving Shillian to his own devices. He vanished. Once the black sword was pulled out, Shillian's wound was left exposed to the harsh rain. The once numbed pain had started to spread again, but that was the only thing he could feel in that moment. Splash, splush, splash, splush. The sound of wild footsteps stomping through the water drifted over, like some passerby was rushing through the rain nearby. But Shilian was no longer secretly hopeful. He slowly sat up, yet the motion was still unexpected. He was interrupted by a loud yell, and a man fell heavily next to him. The man had carried a large basket on his back and wore a bamboo hat to shield him against the rain. It was probably due to the downpour that he hadn't seen there was someone in a pit on the road. He'd been running fast, and he'd only noticed when he'd gotten closer, and Shilian suddenly appeared. He'd tried to stop short, but had instead fallen quite badly. As he tumbled to the ground next to the human-shaped pit, he began to scream a barrage of curses on the spot. What the fuck? His bamboo hat had flown off, and the basket on his back had toppled and spilled its cargo of white rice everywhere. The man sat back and screamed in frustration, slapping at the ground. The wet mud and rice splattered Shilian. Outraged, the man leapt to his feet in a flurry and pointed a finger squarely in Shilian's face. What the hell? This ancestor worked his ass off to earn a bit of money to buy this rice, and now it's all gone just like that! How many lifetimes worth of awful luck is this? Pay me back! Don't sit there pretending to be dead! Pay me back! Shilian didn't bother to spare him a single look, planning to simply ignore him. However, the man was unrelenting, and he grabbed Shilian by the collar. Are you asking for death, huh? I'm talking to you! Yes, Shilian replied coldly. The man clicked his tongue. Well, if you want to fucking die, go scamper off somewhere and die quietly on your own. What are you even doing blocking people's way in the middle of the road? Can't even die in peace. What a nuisance! Shilian let himself be shaken wildly by his collar, stoic and expressionless and utterly numb. Cuss. Cuss all you want. Nothing matters anymore, so curse me however you want. Everything will disappear soon. The sun was about to set. The man gripped the wooden Shilian, pressing him for compensation, and when Shilian remained unresponsive, he bawled him out. That wasn't enough for the man, but after pushing and shoving him for a long time, he picked up his bamboo hat from the ground, put it on his head, and walked away, grumbling. Shilian was thrown back into the pit with a dull thud. Gradually, he began to hear a clamor louder than the sound of the rain. It was a shrieking of millions of souls of the dead sealed within the black sword. As the sun sank bit by bit in the west, they started hollering and wailing like mad inside Shilian's head, cheering and rejoicing for the arrival of freedom and revenge. Shilian raised a hand and covered his face. As his other hand shakily reached out to grab the black sword on the ground, he noticed something strange. The rain seemed to have stopped. No, the rain hadn't stopped. Something had been placed over his head to shield him from the downpour. Shilian's eyes snapped open, and he looked up. He saw someone crouched in front of him, pressing the bamboo hat that had once been on his own head onto Shilian's. It was the man who had just been bawling him out. Shilian glared at the man, and the man glared back at him. What are you looking at me like that for? What? It was just some cussin'. You really want to go die over it? He spat on the ground as he spoke, looking so miserable like you're in mourning. It's unlucky, I tell ya. Shilian was speechless. Image. The man had been rough and aggressive earlier, but he must have felt a little guilty after thinking about what he'd done. He grumbled a bit more, but then he started to try to explain himself. All right, I was over the line earlier, but you still deserved that scolding. Who told you to act so nuts, and who's never been cussed at before? Shilian's eyes were round and bulging, and he found himself unable to speak. The man grew impatient. Fine, it's my bad luck today. You don't have to pay me back for the rice, but what are you still lying around here for? You're a grown man, not a child. Are you waiting for your ma and pa to pick you up? Get up, get up, get up! As he urged him, he tugged at Shilian and firmly pulled him to his feet. Then he heartily slapped Shilian twice on the back. Stand up! Hurry home now! And just like that, Shilian was pulled from the human-shaped pit. The two slaps almost sent him tumbling to the ground. He was so dumbfounded. By the time he snapped out of it, the man was already gone. Only the bamboo hat on his head remained, reminding him that someone had stopped to pull him out. It hadn't been a hallucination. He didn't know how long he had been standing there when White No-Face reappeared behind him. This time, he didn't laugh. His voice wasn't so easy and carefree anymore. He instead sounded vaguely worried and displeased when he asked, What are you doing? The rain was still pouring down, but Shilian was wearing a bamboo hat that someone had given him. While his body was drenched, At least his head and face were spared. But his cheeks were still wet. When Shilian didn't answer, White No Face reminded him in a dark tone, "The sun is about to set. Take up your sword. You know what will happen if you don't." Shilian didn't turn to look at him as he softly said, "Fuck you." "What did you say?" White No Face's voice carried a trace of frost. Now, Shilian turned to him. "You didn't hear me? Then I'll say it again," he said calmly. Suddenly, he struck out with a violent, thunderous kick that sent White No Face flying dozens of meters away. Shilian stomped his foot on the ground, and with one hand clutching his wound, he pointed at White No Face. In his most booming voice, he yelled with everything he had, "I said fuck you! Who do you think you are to dare talk to me like that? I am the Crown Prince!" Tears were streaming down his face. One person. Just one. Really, just one person was enough. While White No Face was sent flying back by his kick, he flipped in the air and landed easily. "Are you mad?" White No Face shouted at him in absolute fury. In all these years, this was the very first time Shilian had seen the creature react with such emotion. The sight gave him enormous pleasure. He grabbed the black sword from the ground and charged forward. "I'm not mad. I've just come back around." The first kick had caught him by surprise, but the next attacks wouldn't be so easy. White No Face dodged Shilian's blows as he flung icy accusations at him. "Have you forgotten how your parents left you, how your people treated you, how your worshippers betrayed you? All because of that man, that puny, insignificant person. You've forgotten everything." "I haven't forgotten, but..." Shilian swung the sword and bellowed with angry vigor. "It's none of your shitty business." White No Face seized the tip of the sword and gripped it extremely firmly. Blood dripped from his fingers and his knuckles cracked. He was losing it a little. He muttered incredulously, "Useless trash, useless trash, you're absolutely useless trash. You've come so far, but you can still regret. You can still actually turn back." Shilian pressed harder into his thwarted sword strike and replied through gritted teeth, "You disgust me. I refuse to ever become something as disgusting as you." That seemed to stun some calm back into White No Face, and he regained the tone of voice that made it sound like everything was under his control. "Never mind. This is simply one final minuscule struggle in the face of death. Or did you forget what I told you?" Shilian exhaled harshly as White No Face slowly and clearly reminded him, "You summoned the souls of the battlefield's dead. Now it's too late. They will not be stopped." Amidst the heavy rain, the black sword in Shilian's hand emitted a sharp, ringing cry that stabbed painfully at his ears and head. "What will you do?" White No Face asked. "Is it worth it to take on the curse of the ages for these people?" Ever since his kick connected, Shilian's blood was boiling in his veins and rushing to his head. All the sword singing and the words he spat came straight from his heart, but with no thought of what he'd do or anything that came next. When he heard White No Face's question, he didn't know how to answer it. "You won't see what I plan to do. I'll get rid of you before that." White No Face snorted. How arrogant. Just as he finished speaking, Shilian felt himself leave the ground, and his entire body was sent flying. He instantly steadied his mind to find his center, but before he could find his balance, a white figure flashed above him and struck down with force. It was like Shilian had become a ball of iron thrown by a sling, and he crashed deep into the ground with a resounding boom. Shilian had started out with a sliver of hope that if he gave it his all with a sudden burst of strength, he could come out victorious. But after the strike, he was painfully aware of the reality. He couldn't win. Too strong. The creature's strength absolutely overwhelmed him. Shilian never found an opponent overwhelming like this before. The very idea would flash through his mind on rare occasions, such as the few times he sparred with Junwoo. But while Junwoo was incredibly strong, his power was measured and controlled, deliberate and careful, the complete opposite of White No Face. There was a maliciousness in White No Face's strength that bordered on vicious, and his murderous intent brimmed with resentment. It only took one strike for Shilian to understand. He would never be able to win against White No Face. Perhaps only Junwoo would be a match for the creature. But the voice of Shilian as he was now would never reach Junwoo. A violent stomp, and White No-Face's snow-white boot crushed down on Shilian's chest. Your arrogance and naive dreams caused everything right from the start, he snapped chillingly. Shilian could feel his organs twist and retract from the stomp, the pain excruciating, but he held back a mouthful of blood. No, it wasn't me. White No-Face queried in an unpleasant tone. Shilian reached out and firmly clutched the boot on his chest. His eyes were clearer than ever before, shining bright. You brought the plague. You caused everything. White No-Face humphed. Perhaps, if you must think of it that way. Then he seemed to smile. But you need to understand something. If it wasn't for your arrogance in defying the heavens, I never would have appeared in this world. I was born by heaven's will. The flames in Shilian's eyes weren't snuffed out by the heavy rain. In fact, they blazed all the stronger. Enough with the arrogance! I don't need you to teach me anything. I can learn on my own. If a thing like you represents heaven's will, then heaven's will should be destroyed. Muffled thunder rolled in from the horizon. Whirling winds blew. White No-Face's voice dropped deep and soft. I took the utmost care in teaching you, but you remain obtuse and stubborn. Crown Prince, I've lost my patience. Shilian coughed a few times, and White No-Face continued. However, it makes no difference. Either way, you already roused them, and there is only one step left to take. Allow me to help you with that. What are you doing? Shilian cried in alarm. White No-Face bent down and seized Shilian's hand, then stuffed the black sword into his palm, forcing him to grip it and raise it to the sky. A blinding bolt of heavenly lightning struck to the black blade and infused its heart with power. It gleamed eerie light. Dense, gloomy clouds began to stir, and soon a sea of black had enveloped Yong'an's skies entirely. Countless faces, arms, and legs roiled within the storm, as if hell had moved to the heavens. Right then, the last sliver of the sun sank below the horizon. Shilian lay on the ground. His eyes reflected the rolling black clouds and the sky torn by flashing lightning and squalling thunder. White No-Face walked away, and the black sword dropped to the ground with a clang. It was like millions of horses were shrieking and howling in the clouds. An apocalyptic parade. Throughout the streets and alleyways, the citizens were confused and alarmed by the cacophony and came outside to see what was happening. What's going on? What's all this noise? What the hell? What's that in the sky? Is that a human face? It's chaos. It's a bad omen. The world is ending. Shilian was covered in mud and grime, and he stumbled as he crawled off the ground. Go home! Go back to your houses! Don't come out! Go home! Run! He yelled. Human face disease was about to be unleashed once again. Shilian frantically waved his hands while White No-Face stood to one side and chuckled softly. Shilian whipped his head around and glared at him in fury. White No-Face tucked his hands into his sleeves and said with easy calm, Why so angry? You can't turn back now, so why not just enjoy the sweetness of revenge? Your hands wrought this. You should appreciate your handiwork. You really think I can't do anything about this? Shilian said. If you have a plan, then please, go ahead, White No-Face replied. Shilian drew in a deep breath. Then he picked up the black sword on the ground and approached the crowd on the street. Everyone recognized him as the crown prince of the previous dynasty, who had been lying in the street for the past 2 days. A living ghost. An ungodly god. An inhuman human. They all backed away cautiously at his approach. All of you! Stop where you are! Shilian barked. Although he was covered in mud and grime from head to toe, there was a strange aura about him. For some reason, everyone actually stopped. Do you see those things in the sky? Shilian asked. The crowd nodded unconsciously. Those are vengeful spirits that will trigger a plague of human face disease. Shilian continued. Very soon it will erupt once again. The black sea of clouds was indeed terrifying, and the people watching didn't need much convincing to believe his words. Horror gripped the crowd. Human face disease? Why has it returned? Could it really be? Some were at a complete loss. Some turned around and hoped to flee, but most of them stood where they were, apprehensively waiting for Shilian to say more. But he had no more to say. He only gripped the sword and raised it to the crowd. The crowd jumped back in fear the moment he raised that chilling weapon. But Shilian barked again. Take this! The people could only gape, mute with fright. What? Someone choked out. Shilian held the sword like that, offering it to them under the pouring rain. As long as you stab me with this sword, you won't be affected by the plague, he said grimly. White No-Face's smile seemed to be falter. A moment later, he asked with relative calm, Crown Prince, have you gone mad? The people were bewildered as well. What are you saying? Is he crazy? Take the sword and stab him. Really? What is he planning? The crowd babbled and muttered, and White No-Face suddenly burst out laughing. Have you lost your mind? Or do you miss the taste of being pierced by 100 swords? No, I'm afraid this time it will be a 10,000. Open your eyes and look properly at the sky. His voice quickly lost all its mirth as he pointed up. The vengeful spirits have enveloped all of Yong'an. If you want to save the common people, all of Yong'an will need to stab you. You will become nothing but a puddle of flesh within a day. This foolishness is no different from when you tried to defy the heavens and create rain. Do you really think you can save everyone? Shilian kept his back turned to him. If a day isn't enough, let it take a month. If a month won't do, then 2 months, 3 months. If I can't save 10,000, then I'll save 1,000. If I can't save 1,000, then I'll save 100, or 10, or even just 1. Why? White No-Face demanded in outrage. Shilian raised the sword with both hands and roared to the skies. I don't have a reason. Just because I want to. Even if I explained it to you. He cocked his head to glance at him. Useless trash like you wouldn't understand. His condescension and disdain were too obvious and cut too deeply. White No-Face couldn't retain the calm in his voice as he said, You. What did you call me? Shilian pointedly ignored him and turned calmly to the crowd. Just 1 stab and everything will be all right. I won't die. You've all seen that for yourselves over the past 2 days. However, everyone is only allowed 1 turn with no messing about, and you all must listen to my instructions. If anyone tries to start anything, I'll smash your head. Trust me, I can smash 100 of you with 1 hand. White No-Face was incredulous. The useless trash who brought ruin to his kingdom dares to call me useless trash? No one dared take the sword in Jillian's hand, but no one dared to flee either. As he was ignored, White No-Face sank deeper and deeper into anger. Very well, he said coolly. Then I will sit back and watch you be ruined by your obstinance. However, no matter how this ends, you've brought it upon yourself. I hope you don't fall apart and come crying to me in regret. As the people shuffled around and waffled in confusion, the black clouds in the sky grew denser by the minute and pressed down heavier. They seemed ready to collapse. The shrieking cries of countless human faces were so loud, it was like they were right beside their ears. Finally, one father was so scared he couldn't take it anymore. He dragged his child over and took the sword. I'll give it a try with my xiaobao, I guess. The others in the crowd were still hesitating, and they exclaimed in surprise, You're actually going to do it? The father seemed just as hesitant, but he braced himself and stammered, But I really don't think he'll die. I'm sorry, buddy, I'm really sorry. My xiaobao. He raised a hand to cover the eyes of the small child in his arms, and forced him to grip the black sword. White No-Face didn't interfere, just chuckled mockingly. Xie clenched his fists and waited for the pain to seize him. In his head, he told himself, It's all right. I've already been hurt so many times. I'll get used to this soon enough. But just as the black sword was about to pierce his gut, someone unexpectedly knocked it aside. The pain Xie was expecting never came. Instead, he heard a loud, clear, You can't! Xie whipped his head around to look. The one who had knocked the black sword off course was the water merchant. The water merchant had been in the crowd, but he stepped further forward after his tolerance was exhausted. Well, this is an ugly sight. Can't you see that huge bloody spot on his stomach? Are you really sure this won't kill him? And even if he doesn't die, he'll clearly still bleed. The father staunched up his face miserably. But... The water merchant's wife subtly elbowed him again, but the water merchant turned and admonished her with a hushed, Stop poking me. If you have a problem, we'll talk later. Then he turned back around. Besides, for all we know, we could contract the disease from stabbing him. So let's not just stab blindly, huh? The father pointed to the sky. But soon. Just then, the small child in his arms started crying, and the water merchant pointed at him. Look! Look, your son is scared to tears because you're forcing him to stab someone! Sure enough, the small child started crying even louder and threw the black sword to the ground. He probably didn't understand what his father was thinking, but he was scared nonetheless. This killed the father's plan completely, and he retreated into the crowd, holding his son. There was some among the crowd who had been ready to try, but they didn't feel as brave anymore when they saw how the first person who stepped up had been sent packing. They could only yell anonymously from the safety of the crowd. Didn't you hear what he said? A plague of human faces is about to descend upon us. He's a god of misfortune. He brought this on our heads. However, the water merchant continued, even if he's the god of misfortune, you don't think he'd willingly ask to be stabbed, do you? His arguing had started to piss some people off. He said that he's willing, so what's the problem? Do you want us all to die together? Just focus on selling your water. You shortchange people all the time, so what are you doing sticking your neck out now? The water merchant's wife had kept elbowing him through all this, but when she heard that accusation, her face went red and she exploded. Fucking bullshit! Who shortchanged you? Come the hell out here and say that to my face! The accuser instantly shrank back. The water merchant also flushed, but soon after he hardened up again. I say! Whether he's willing is his business, but whether we act on it is our business. We're talking about picking up a blade and stabbing someone. If I had given him water or something over the past few days, maybe I'd be more willing to try this, but I didn't. And who among us did? If I injured him now, I'd feel ashamed. Everyone felt silent at this because he'd really hit the nail on the head. Over the past 2 days, not a single person had tried to help Chilean. The water merchant had at least wanted to help, but he still hadn't managed it. The rest of them hadn't even dared to spare a glance at Chilean's way. Then what should we do? If we can't do this, why don't you come up with a better plan? Someone grumbled. The crowd was about to get rowdy again, and some even tried to put themselves to the front. Just then, another bellow echoed out. Who's making all this racket? If anyone wants to get rough, this ancestor's got a knife! It was the chubby chef who wanted to pull out the sword, just after Chilean fell from the sky. He'd been provoked into action, and he roared at the crowd. That fellow's right! Yesterday a bunch of people were so adamant about stopping me from going up to him. If not for them, I would have pulled out that sword. So why are the ones who stopped me the same ones making the most noise now? Pathetic! Think you're special? Well, you certainly don't see such shamelessly thick skins every day. The chef was a large man with a booming voice at the height of his anger. It seemed he had just emerged from his kitchen, so he still had a butcher knife in one hand. Instantly, the ones who had been complaining the loudest didn't dare make another sound. Some members of the crowd had been absent from the area for the past few days, and when they asked what had happened, they were all surprised. No way! None of you tried to help him? Yeah, you all just left him lying there for 2 days? You didn't even help him sit up or anything? The more questions they asked, the more shame the others felt. Don't act like you would have gone over to help. It's easy to say those pretty things after the fact, they countered. Don't forget, none of us will escape when those hellish things descend. Huh, I assure you, if I were there, I definitely would have pulled out the sword. It's easy to run your mouth after the whole thing is over. Wait, what are you all arguing about? Pulling out a sword isn't the problem right now. The argument was wild and unruly on both sides. It was a brawl waiting to happen. The rain slowly receded and stopped. However, the black clouds were only growing thicker. Their pressure was so intense, it was suffocating the hundreds of people below. Suddenly, startled screams exploded from within the crowd, and fingers pointed to the sky. It's coming!